Hey, we're back with the Frozen Assets podcast series with another episode focusing on entrepreneurs and also just the general freeze drying industry because it's fastly growing for a lot of different people. And where we're here today is we're talking with a commercial freeze drying company that's been doing commercial freeze drying manufacturing for a long period of time. And now with the exponential boom in different recipes and innovative entrepreneurs, man, there's so much to talk to this company about. It's Parker FreezeDry. They're based in Beresford, South Dakota, brand new facility. They do everything assembly and manufacturing here. We're going to be talking with the sales and marketing manager, Matt Graunke, who covers everything about Parker FreezeDry and really inform you and educate you who's watching this video about the commercial freeze drying space. So without further ado, Matt, thanks for joining me here today in Beresford, South Dakota. Introduce yourself. Let us know about Parker.
Wonderful. Thanks, David, for coming up to visit us. This is going to be a good event here that we get to kind of show you around, let you know how this equipment is put together, everything that goes into it, and kind of talk about some of the steps that go from taking it from a concept at a small scale to equipment that can process, thousands of pounds per batch.
And so Parker FreezeDry, tell me about the company as a whole.
First thing they're going to notice is there's a lot of opportunity as far as education goes. A lot of our sales process, a lot of our marketing initiatives all revolve around a consultative approach to things and helping to make sure everybody understands. So that they can, make the right decisions that's right for them and their business. We have Parker FreezeDry. We've been in this industry for quite some time. The business was founded over in Wisconsin 20-some years ago. And at the time, Parker was a customer of Proform Fabrication, which is the parent company of the brand. As time passed on, we had an opportunity to acquire Parker FreezeDry, so instead of them being a customer, now it became a brand of ours. And instead of just manufacturing the chambers, now we handle the entire process with the refrigeration, with the control systems, with the after-sales service, parts and maintenance. All of that stuff is all coming out of this facility now.
And so Parker, how many freeze dryer types did you have initially when you bought Parker FreezeDry to what you have today?
Yeah, so at the time, I believe we had 5 different versions, and now I believe we've got 6 with kind of just improving on them as time goes on, as technology gets better, taking advantage of opportunities to make things run a little more efficiently and allow a little bit more control of some of the different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and so you have a lot of different freeze dryers that fit a lot of different types of people's companies and recipes, which is very exciting in this industry right now because everyone has things from pet food to candy to ice cream to meals, all of that. Mm-hmm. Tell us about Parker. Like, who are you trying to target? Who is best suit for looking at a Parker freeze dryer?
As far as industries are concerned, it's really never a dull moment because every week we've got somebody new reaching out and asking us questions about scaling. Freeze drying is becoming more mainstream and more, awareness of it as a technology has grown quite a bit over the last couple of years. So, where pet food would be a big part of the puzzle, now that's human food as well. We've got, backpacking meals, we've got survival meals, we've got, on the agriculture side, people that are trying to deal with what otherwise would become refuse. If they've got a crop and a portion of it is not as pretty as the rest, so it can't go to the grocery store. Groups are finding us and finding ways that, hey, we can still salvage this and offer, product based on that. We see things in the ag industry. We see biotech, supplements, cannabis. There's lots of different things going on. And just when I think I've heard the strangest thing I've ever heard, then we get another call of something that was even more unique than that. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but the whole point is, you got to figure it out.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 different types of people looking into freeze drying right now as of 2024, and we're almost all the way done with 2024 as of this interview. But it's like 2 people are looking at freeze drying. One is the entrepreneur starting something from scratch and saying, I really like this concept and I want to develop my own recipe and and actually bring out a new product to market. And then you've got the other side where people are recognizing that they can have a completely new SKU in their product line, where it's like they've always had this product that's been more fresh and the shelf life has been a finite amount. And now they look at freeze dry and they're like, oh man, we can accelerate our growth and keep adding different things. So is that kind of what you're seeing too?
I would absolutely agree with you. I think that, a large portion of the contact that I have with prospects and customers is it's a pretty even split. You've got the innovators that are trying something completely new, that are building something out of nothing. And, they're the ones that have done the homework on the countertop unit. They've proved out their concept and now they're ready for that next step. How do I take this to that next level? And then we've got the other groups that already have a functioning, successful business and they're creating this new arm, this new SKU, this new line to go with their facility. Some of that is just because they've already, they're in whatever their business is, and hey, if we do it this way, now we've got another SKU with longer shelf life. Other ones is, like I was saying before, this whole sustainability initiative that everybody's on right now, and just trying to make the most and stretching everything as far as we can, and getting the most value out of everything. They're finding that things that were otherwise just waste, and it was causing them money to get rid of it, there may be an opportunity to turn that into revenue. And that's something that they were otherwise losing money paying to get rid of. Now it becomes a source of a SKU that they can sell for whatever that product is for.
Yeah, and the fact that the U.S. has one of the largest food waste rates in the entire world, I think it's close to 40%. It's like, I think about my own like habitual food waste habits, which are like, when I trim a strawberry stem off, I throw away some strawberry and then also the stem.
Yeah.
But the stem has some nutritional value as well as there's still strawberries on there. And there's some people on YouTube that are using it to make a powder, and then they use that powder to make smoothies or to flavor something naturally. There's so many arrays of applications.
Yeah, the opportunities are endless at this point because there's just so many different things happening that you could do something with. So that's what makes it exciting to be part of the business right now.
Yeah. Now, so going back to the freeze dryer, so you've got 6 different freeze dryers. What are the different capacities that someone has to figure out how to what's the right fit for them? Just take us through kind of each one and maybe how you find the right fit for them.
Right. So the way that I like to do it is I like to work it backwards. How much do you want to produce in a year? So you find out what's your goal, and I want to make X. Well, okay, how many days are you working that year? Divide it by that. Because you're assuming for most products it's about a batch per day when it comes to most things. You get into some situations where you've got shorter times or longer times, but you're not working 24 hours a day. So if it ends in the middle of the night, you're not getting up and going to change it over.
Right.
So just using simple assumptions, 1 batch per day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Obviously, there's going to be some leeway for maintenance, things like that, but that's typically how the path that I like to follow is just working it backwards. What's your goal? And then what are the milestones to get there? And then at that point, that tells us what we need per batch, and then we can point them into the right machine from there, or numerous of the right machine, whatever that ends up being. And from a machine size standpoint, from a batch capacity standpoint, our system runs trays, and our Summit system, which is going to be our entry into the industrial freeze dry space, that has 15 trays in it. So approximately 97 pounds, 98 pounds. We'll call it 100 just to keep the numbers round. The next size up from there is going to be our Parker 2, which can do up to 500 pounds per batch. The Parker 6 system is 1,500 pounds, and then the Parker 10 and the 10R are going to be 2,500 pound units.
Wow. And thinking about that per day, do you know of companies that are actually producing that much per day? Even
Absolutely.
The 2,500 and all that? Wow.
Absolutely.
Per day.
Yeah. And I would say exponentially more than that with our systems. Yeah.
And is that because they're trying to support just the domestic, U.S. demand, or a lot of those companies producing that amount, they're doing things globally?
You know, I can't comment on that because I know that there are a lot of pieces that need to be in place in order for global shipping, and I'm not sure who's all doing that and who's not. I know that it's a fairly challenging prospect when it comes to do with anything with food.
Yeah.
So I'm not certain that any of these guys are shipping overseas at this point.
Okay.
That I'm not certain.
Staying on the path of customers who come to approach you, so we now kind of know, all right, we work backwards from, how much you want to produce, things like that. But what are some of the red flags that you see when you get inquiries in your team about someone looking at starting and purchasing and going more commercial with a freeze drying company? What are some red flags that you're like, you're not quite there yet, so that someone watching this is like, yeah, maybe I need to recalibrate, but I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, I don't know that red flag is the right term, just because it's not like I'm saying just stop, but it's maybe just let's take a step back, because you want to make sure you've got your concept proven out. You want to make sure you've got a recipe. And then you want to make sure you've done enough homework on the actual cost of doing business, so that, is what I'm doing scalable? And there's a lot of different calculations you can use, but you want to make sure you kind of got an idea of your business plan, so that you're on the right track. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting time.
Yeah.
I would say just make sure you've got your concept proven out, and then you're ready for that. Okay, now what do I do?
Yeah. There's other opportunities to have a commercial freeze dryer, though, to help fill in the gaps while you're trying to create that demand.
Oh, for
Can you
sure.
talk a little bit about where you've seen those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing about if you're going to have a piece of equipment like this is you want it to be running all the time. So if your current demand only requires you to run this machine twice a week, there's enough demand out there on the market right now that if, put the word out, you've got capacity for 3 days that week, I'm pretty sure you're going to find somebody that'll be able to, fill that machine and keep it running for you. Just, there's going to be challenges at the local level to make sure you're in a position to legally operate a business that way with your certifications and everything that you need to do. But, there's plenty of opportunity in the marketplace to fill freeze dryers right now.
Yeah.
We know that as fact just because of the amount of attention all of this is getting.
Yeah.
People want to know more.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of planning that goes into doing a freeze drying business, especially going more commercial. But there's a good way to inexpensively test those waters, which a lot of the audience here on this channel know. Like, you can buy a home freeze dryer, test those different elements, see what's working well, what the texture, what the consistency is going to be like. Do you like it being super hard and crunchy, or do you like it being more like a wafer where it's not as crunchy, it's more like melt in your mouth type of feel? How does it reconstitute? All of those different types of things. And you can do that with a home freeze dryer. And then when you look in a commercial, it's like, okay, the recipe is this, and this is how we're going to get it out to market to multiple audiences.
Right. And one thing that to take into consideration too is just, I don't know what the right term is, just the sheer efficiency of a system at this level, running all commercial equipment, commercial vacuum, industrial refrigeration for the cold plates and, for your condenser. That profile that you've created in your countertop unit, sure, it translates to this, but then you're going to have access to all the different KPIs that come with having a commercial system to allow for improvements in your processes beyond that. I mean, it's there's a little bit of a learning curve to learning how to read it, but once you understand what's going on inside the machine and you understand the product that you're putting into it, there's always opportunities for continuous improvement.
Yeah. I mean, and freeze drying is still relatively, for freeze drying food and all the different recipes that are coming out, it's still a relatively new market. That's why I think this industry is still very at the early stages, because if you look at most food processing, manufacturing facilities, they're investing millions of dollars in equipment to be able to cut certain produce or cut certain things, package it the right way, test it, have different specialist nutrition people on staff. That's what somebody needs to look at when they're looking at a freeze drying business commercially, but it's common practice no matter what. But people still continue to run those businesses because there is profit, there is money to be made there.
Absolutely.
And so it's it's general practice across the board is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So let's say somebody is ready to purchase a commercial freeze dryer. They talk to you. Walk me through what the sales process looked like.
Yeah.
From the time they contact you to they buy one. Like, what's the full service that Parker offers to someone who's going to do this?
Yeah, so we're going to start with a consultative call, and we're going to do a lot of listening. And I want to know about what it is you're doing, how you're doing it currently, what's your biggest challenges, and what's your goals. Once we've got that kind of laid out and get an understanding, we're going to figure out what machine is the one you want. When we get to that point, we'll go through a contract, set up lead times, talk about how everything's going to come together. The system's going to get built here. We're going to test it here, where you'll be invited up to see it run at the factory acceptance. Once that is complete, then we basically prep it for shipping. You get it to your facility. Once it's installed at your facility, then our team comes down and we'll commission it for you. So on our larger systems, the Parker 2 through the 10, we're on site and we're working with your team and basically bringing it all back online, doing training. It's usually anywhere from 3 to 4 days. On our smaller systems like the Summit, all that is done virtually because that's a little bit more of a plug and play style of setup.
Yeah.
Where Summit, everything is all on one crate, and you've got your receptacle, and you get it installed, you plug it in, you turn it on, and get a hold of the team. We guide you through it virtually.
Okay.
The larger systems is a little bit more hands-on because we've got a refrigeration component that's outdoors. You've got piping that's in play. You've got electrical that's in play. You've got carts that move around instead of a cartridge that's permanently in the machine. So it's just a little bit more hands-on, so we send more hands.
Yeah. Now you've said team a couple times.
Yeah.
So when you install these things for different customers, what type of team setup do they have that you're like, this was a good setup, that they had the right people to run this freeze drying operation and run the freeze dryer?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So from the install side of things, anybody that's running a piece of equipment of this level, when you get into this commercial industrial phase, you're going to want to have a qualified commercial HVAC to handle all the refrigeration side, and then you're going to want to have qualified electrical. So any kind of is it electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, that kind of maintenance type stuff.
Okay.
So those are going to be the two main players you need on that side. From a team on staff, you're going to need somebody that knows how to program the machine, set up your recipes, somebody that understands that process and understands freeze drying so that they can look at that data that's being shared with them, and then they can make decisions for improvements if needed, enhancements, what have you. And then you're going to need a labor element, and that can all be the same person. It can be different people. Our system is set up that you have different levels of access in the operating system, so that your management level, your person that's designing your recipes doesn't have to worry about somebody that shouldn't be in there changing anything and ruining a batch. So you've got just a couple different levels of things, and I would say our large systems, the 2 up through the 10, a team of 2 safely loads and unload it. You're talking about a lot of product, and it's a big piece of equipment, so you want to be safe.
Yeah.
Making sure that the carts are getting in there, they're not tipping over, you're not spilling product, nobody's getting hurt.
And I think about that time frame, when you think about man, that 2 people, if you're looking at employing those 2 people, well, you got to think about too, a lot of the product that's going to go in a commercial freeze dryer is going to be in there for 24 to maybe 48 hours. So I mean, it could be a part-time person that says, hey, everything's prepped, it's in the freezer, getting pre-frozen, now we can put it into the freeze dryer. So I think for most people watching this, it doesn't have to be these full-time individuals. You can start off with people who are like, hey, your job's this on these days, and you have a schedule of when they come in and out so that those people who are specialized know what to do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, we see wearing a lot of hats. They've got the machine loaded, they hit start, the rest of their shift, they're prepping tomorrow's batch. Getting the carts loaded, getting it rolled into the freezer for the next day, or the IQF, or whatever they're working on if they need to. So there's a lot of different things and a lot of different ways you can do it, and obviously the more units you acquire and the bigger you build your business, the more people you're going to need. You start getting into the point where you're running multiple machines, and you've got multiple shifts, well, all of a sudden you're not looking at a batch a day anymore, because if it was only a 16-hour batch, you're turning that thing over every 16 hours instead of every 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it can really exponentially scale. Just kind of depends on how big you get.
Now, when you've gone to your clients and done these installs, what type of like facility does that look like? Like, these are the core elements. Like, you can't have this type of commercial kitchen or this setup. Like, you need to have these things: power, refrigeration.
Yeah.
Like, what types of things do you commonly see that the person listening here can gather that they need?
So at a minimum, you want to be able to at least pre-freeze one batch, depending on what size you get into. Personally, I would suggest 2 batches, just so that you're a day ahead, and you're allowing yourself for any kind of lost time that could possibly take
So you need a
place.
walk-in freezer that can get cooled
Certainly
enough.
do. Yeah, if you're on a summit level, a console style freezer that can hold 30 trays is plenty, because you can only fit 15 trays in a summit. But when you get into the 2, the 6, the 10, you want to make sure you got a walk-in freezer that can accommodate, at least 1 batch. I recommend 2.
Okay.
So beyond that, that's a whole different thing, because it's different for every company. What do they need? Are they packaging, or are they putting it all in pallets and shipping it right out the door for someone else to do it? Are they white labeling? Are they co-packing, where they're packaging 50 different brands, 50 different SKUs? That can change drastically depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
The needs of a company that's doing bulk supplements is going to be quite different than the needs of the company that's setting up backpacking deals.
And so talk about maybe more of the power side of a freeze dryer.
Yeah.
I know it varies based on your
Right.
6 different freeze dryers, but is it expensive to output a freeze dryer this magnitude, or is it surprisingly not as other types of machines that would be in an industrial facility?
Yeah, so it's challenging because there's so many variables with everything we talk about. But, 3-phase power, when you start getting into the 500-pound units or better, 3-phase power is going to be a necessity. And you want to make sure you've got, enough amperage. And that varies from machine to machine, what your needs are. But the way our systems are set up is they're almost, in a way, modular, where you don't have to build out a whole facility just for this freeze drying system. You can find a facility like ours that's empty, that has 3-phase power, and just fill it with freeze dryers.
Yeah.
That's the way we've designed it. It's scalable. It's easy to implement as long as you've got a loading dock door and enough electricity.
Yeah, and I'm not an electrician, Matt. So what's a 3-phase?
3-phase, 480 volt. I'm not an electrician either, but I know that so our Summit systems run on single phase power. So somebody that's just coming off of a countertop system and they're working out of their garage and they want to put in a Summit, it's usually pretty easy to get 240 volt single phase power in your garage. It's it's like a nice heavy duty welder or a dryer or some electric appliance like that. When you get into industrial equipment, 3-phase is fairly standard from what I understand. I've had talks with a few customers when they're shopping for their next facility. They've ran into some challenges with their local utilities. If they were in an industrial area that was older or wasn't really built out right, or where they couldn't get it, or it was going to be not cost effective to get it put in there.
Yeah.
So that's just something you need to have in mind. And if somebody's thinking about something like this, that's one of the discussions we're going to have during that early discussions is, okay, do you have this kind of power in that facility? And sometimes they know and sometimes they don't. Yeah. So it's just the stuff we all make sure everybody knows about.
Maybe let's talk too about there seems to be a gap in there's people running freeze drying businesses that have a lot of home freeze dryers, and then there's the commercial side that seems much more intimidating, much more capital investment. So how does someone afford, or how have you seen clients afford a commercial freeze dryer?
On the lending side of things, we're a manufacturer of equipment. We're not a bank. However, we do have people in the industry that are, and they're familiar with this sort of a setup. They know what goes into this type of business, and they set up basically capital equipment financing. So refer a lot of people that way for those discussions, and there's they get into the weeds on things that I'm not privy to.
Yeah.
And I'm fine not being privy to that stuff. But that's typically how it's done, is they'll look at some sort of commercial lending.
Okay.
And it's just finding a partner that works for them, basically.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple different groups that we work with that our customers have worked with in the past. And we don't mind sending them an introduction so that they can have those discussions and make sure it makes sense.
Seems also in this gap where you have customers who probably have dozens of home freeze dryers because they've built up that demand. They're seeing a lot of success. But all those freeze dryers cost, less than $5,000 for each one. So, your machines cost six figures. What's the difference in like the ROI on one of your freeze dryers versus people who have dozens of these other freeze dryers that cost a lot less? What are the challenges that you would see you're going to no longer have with a dozen freeze dryers versus what you have with yours?
Yeah, a lot of times if you're growing to that point and that's the kind of production that you need, I don't know how you can afford not to make that move, because there's so many unaccounted for costs associated with running that many small machines as opposed to one large machine or two of the Summit models at 100 pounds apiece. To get into it, our Summit system sells for $135,000. You're processing 100 pounds a day, typically, depending on what your product is. That's your wet product going in. With an industrial quality system, you're planning your maintenance on the machine, typically once a year, instead of running the risk of your 20 machines, letting 3 of them plan it for you.
Yeah.
So it really becomes a crucial piece of the business, is how much time are you spending to save this money on these 20 other units? In the grand scheme of things, did it help you at all? It helped you get going. But now that you're there, now it's time to think about that next step. Everything you did to get those 20 was great, but 20 more of those isn't going to get you to where you can get when you take that next step.
Yeah, I also think about, your cart systems has a ton of racks, and a ton of different trays too. And, versus, 20 or 30 different of the home freeze dryers, same amount of number of trays, but they're all getting dirty at different points. They're all needed to be sanitized at different points. They all have their oils changed at different points.
Yeah.
They all have to defrost at different points. Versus what you're seeing on the commercial side. No matter what commercial freeze dryer, you're only doing it one time now.
Yeah. It's a streamlined process. It just comes with scaling, and scaling is scary, but it's a necessary part of the process if that's the growth you're looking for.
Just other type of little small questions for you to answer too about what I'm usually accustomed to, because I just have some small home freeze dryers for my business. But so what type of oil does a big pump for a commercial freeze dryer use?
I don't know what the exact name of it is, but I know we stock it here, and we've set up an e-commerce platform for our users and our customers to order it.
Okay.
So we basically, anything from a parts standpoint is here at Beresford with us. And we've set up a specific channel for our users that they can go in and they can order it whenever they need it, just online, and we'll ship it out the next day. And if it's an emergency and they need like an overnight or something like that, we've got options for that as well. The whole point of going to this level is because you need to be operating every day.
Yeah.
So that goes back to you're allowed to plan your maintenance instead of having the machine plan it for you.
And does a Parker freeze dryer need to be defrosted? Do you have just like the home freeze dryer, it has to defrost, get all that water out, and then refreeze again?
Yeah, so we're talking about a lot more water when you get to this level.
Yeah.
So there is some runoff that's going out the drain, but as a whole, the ice is falling off in chunks, and depending on what size machine, that's moisture's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And that usually means with a shovel, in between batches after it comes off of those cold plates.
Yeah.
So
So
keep that in mind. Usually that's included in your batch per day calculations
yeah.
because you're figuring it's, 2 to 4 hours of defrost time and you're running an 18-hour batch type of a scenario.
Okay.
But we can talk a little bit about that when we get out there too.
A new customer contacts you. What's the first thing you want them to know about Parker, and what do you hope that they gather from knowing more about your company?
Yeah, probably the most important thing is that we need them to know is that we're here. We're here for you. When you're getting into equipment at this level, you need to have a very consultative approach, and you need to be able to reach out and connect when you need to. And that's one of the things that we take a lot of pride on is once everything's installed and we've gone back home and you're operating your own equipment, if something comes up, you've got somebody you can call. We can either log in remotely and look at it with you. We can talk with you on the phone. Very rarely do we ever have to make a visit unless something is, out of the ordinary. But typically, most of the things that would happen in a production scenario can be resolved just by a few conversations and us better understanding the situation. And then our team will walk you through so that you understand the situation as well. One of the things that we offer and that I feel is fairly unique to this industry is we've created this whole knowledge base, Parker University, on our website. And that is a constantly growing and changing resource for any one of our users. It's not open to the public because there's proprietary info in there. But once we've installed your system and brought you online, you and your staff will have access to that. And that's where they go to ask questions about maintenance or very specific instances like hey, I'm noticing that I'm getting a heavy draw on this. What do you think that has something to do with? You go in there and you can look under the control system and you can say, okay, well, make sure all your gaskets are still good. Make sure you don't have a corrupted valve somewhere. Make sure you're still getting good vacuum. So we work really hard on taking feedback from our users and then using that feedback to continue to grow that knowledge base. If our service team is taking a call over and over again from different people, that tells us that we need to put more info in that so that answer is already out there, so that they don't need to call just to get something that is apparently fairly common question.
You've been through a lot of different shows over the past couple years. You've been in this role for quite a while too, but you see everything from big pet food manufacturers freeze drying to all the different types of manufacturers, but you've seen a lot of things over the course of the years. Where do you see freeze drying headed in the short term, but also the long term?
Trends in the industry is just growth, just overall growth. And whether that's a specific segment or just the industry as a whole. There's so many different people reaching out and different opportunities coming up about ways to use freeze drying. If one of the other industries starts to tail off, it's very likely somebody else has figured out a way to bring it back up again. I don't envision any kind of a dip at all because it's new enough. It's not new, but it's becoming more, people are more aware of it now that there's just so many innovators. If what is it, the bell curve? We're on the front of the hockey stick.
Yeah.
And it doesn't appear to be, when is that going to dip back down again? Everybody's still figuring out all the different things we can do with this. And as technology continues to improve and we continue to, innovate our systems and keep bringing new things to market to make this process more efficient, make the operations of it, the maintenance, whatever, all the different things that we're working on, it's just only going to get better from here.
Well, we've been talking to Matt Graunke from Parker Freeze Dry. We're going to take a look at their facility and answer a lot more questions. But if you're interested in freeze drying and starting a freeze drying business, this is the channel for you. I want you to subscribe to this channel if you're interested in starting a freeze drying business, or you can even just like this video, and that'll help YouTube and all the different platforms that you're viewing this on to kind of give you more information, more videos on about freeze drying. So, Matt, thanks for joining me on this podcast, and we'll be in touch more about Parker. Let's go check out the facility.